I would get stopped in the street, and I still get stopped in the street by guys. These big guys come over to me and say, "You're Steve Biddulph, aren't you?" And I say, "Yeah, what are you going to do to me? You know, you're going to break my head off." and they say, "That book, that effing book of yours, that's the story of my life, mate." And it really helped me. And I just want to let you know, sometimes, like I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for that book.
Welcome back to Raising Men. One of the founding hypotheses of this whole project is that there is a quiet crisis happening with boys today. Across classrooms, playgrounds, and homes, boys are falling behind in school. They're struggling with identity, and they're being forced to grow up in a world that's not quite sure what to do with masculinity anymore. And my guest today, Steve Biddulph, has been one of the world's leading voices on this for over 3 decades. He's a psychologist, an educator, and an author of 2 books, Raising Boys and The New Manhood. And those books have shaped how millions of parents and teachers understand male development. His message is simple, but I think profound. If we want strong men, we need to raise emotionally healthy young boys. Steve, welcome to Raising Men.
Hi, Shaun, and hello to everyone who's watching or listening to this. Great to have some time with you.
Well, thanks so much. And now, how did you come to focus on boys and men and fatherhood and parenting and education for your career?
Okay, well, people who are watching this can see I've got gray hair and I'm seriously elderly and geriatric now. And so, but in the 1970s, I was a young, keen young guy, just graduated as a psychologist, and I got recruited to a new clinic that was being set up in an industrial kind of town in Tasmania, Australia. And this clinic was doing something pretty radical. It was seeing the whole family. It was a family therapy clinic, which in those days was a new idea. And so someone had a kid with some kind of problems with the law or with behavior or something. My boss said, the whole family's got to come. We're not seeing kids on their own, which is a pretty sensible thing when you think about it.
I'm astonished that was revolutionary, but it absolutely is. That seems like an obvious thing to do.
Yeah, 'cause in those days, it was like you're getting your car serviced. You'd drop your kid at the psychologist to get them fixed. Yeah. And that never worked. But anyhow, we got to see hundreds and hundreds of families. And these were what we call, I think you call it in the States as well, blue-collar families.
That's right.
Families, parents who worked at the mill or worked on a farm or worked in the forest. And and what we found was that the mums were great. The mums pretty much knew what they were doing. But the dads really struggled. And in the families that came to see us, you could tell that dads, they loved their kids and they work their guts out all their life to provide for their kids. And but when it came to actually relating to their kids, they were kind of distant and stiff and awkward. And so began to think, well, someone's got to help the dads. And then something happened, Shaun, which was more personal. That I was I was married. Sharon and I had a farm, and we had a little boy, and we were ready to have another child. And the pregnancy of our much hoped for second child miscarried. And that's the thing that happens. It's a very common thing, happens to millions of people, every week. Sure. But it really knocked me around. I didn't understand it, but it put my wife Sharon and I. We had a kind of a grief reaction that was on a different timetable. her grief was different to mine. She didn't want to talk to me, and I didn't know what was happening, and I just got very, very sort of depressed and really affected by that. And when I tried to talk to my friends, they just didn't come through for me, Shaun. They just didn't know what to say. And I began to realize, well, have I even got friends? You know, I thought these were my friends. Us guys we don't support each other properly. And this began a journey right into the whole thing. Robert Bly had just written Iron John, his book about men, the idea of father hunger and the father wound. And so Manhood was the book I wrote out of that experience. And so it was personal, but it was also something professional I saw the need for. And Manhood started 500 men's groups around Australia, and I would get stopped in the street, and I still get stopped in the street by guys. These big guys come over to me and say, "You're Steve Biddulph, aren't you?" And I say, "Yeah, what are you going to do to me? You know, you're going to break my head off." and they say, "That book, that effing book of yours, that's the story of my life, mate," and it really helped me. And I just want to let you know, sometimes, like I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for that book. And that was just, I'm a quiet sort of guy and I'm very unsure of anything that I do. But this was very affirming message that we were onto something here, and we had to help the guys, and the guys would respond to that, and they would turn around. You give a man the right help, he will turn around, it's just that no one ever did that. And so that was that's enough of the origin sort of story, but that's where it began.
That is such a powerful story. I love it, and I love that legacy that you have.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you get recognized on the street. That's fantastic. Now, you have argued that, and I agree with this argument, that boys might benefit from starting school later. But that's a big kind of systematic change, and I don't think we should be holding our breath, waiting for the culture to catch up to this. So since traditional school environments can disadvantage boys in areas like reading, behavioral expectations, emotional development, that sort of thing, what can we do to support our son's education when, within the current system that funnels them into a situation that's frankly suboptimal?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to take a while to unpack that one, Shaun, because
okay. Well, we've got a while. We need it.
First of all, to understand what's going on is that when a little baby is still in the womb, it was still inside his mum. If it's a boy baby, there's a point at about third sort of month of pregnancy that little testicles start to pop out and start to grow. And straight away they make testosterone, that's their job, and they start making testosterone, and they start shaping this little fetus into a boy baby. And one of the main effects they have is that they put the brakes on. The testosterone slows down the development of the boy. And whereas a little baby girl in the womb is kind of surging on, little baby boys grow more slowly, and we have no idea why that is. But at the moment of birth, they're probably three or 4 weeks less developed than baby girls.
Wow, that's counterintuitive.
Yeah, and maybe it's got something to do with that they've got extra things they need to develop, but we don't know. But the result is that with a little baby boy, he's a little bit harder to switch on. It's sort of like, when mum's holding him and talking to him and, how you going, little fella, and tickling him and smiling at him. You have to work a little harder to get him on the outside. And Richard Reeves, who's written about the science of this, they're even more likely to die in early childhood. there's a vulnerability in boy babies, and so and by the time they are starting school, coming to your question, so age 5 or so, 4 or 5, the difference between the boys and girls is from 6 to 12 months difference, Shaun. So it's a, enormous.
The gap gets bigger.
Yeah, at that age it gets bigger, and then they slowly start to catch up, but they don't catch up till they're about 22, and so it's a lifelong thing. And so girls, for instance, have puberty a year and a half to 2 years sooner than boys do. But if we stay with our school starting, what this means is that little boys can be a year behind the girl they're sitting beside in the desk. Yeah. And that's not good. And a year behind, what they're behind in is two things. Talking, be able to put a sentence together and express themselves, and getting finger control, picking up a pen and being able to do nice work and schools have traditionally been very big on, neat work, and answering the questions and so if you're a little boy and you just get this pretty immediate, they're not silly, they're not stupid, they can see those girls are so good at it, what can I do? And so very likely to get restless, discouraged, not be able to follow the teacher, and the whole trajectory, which of course ends up in not very good places sometimes. And so I began, when I wrote Raising Boys, which was 1996, I said, don't send them. If you've got any doubts, just hold your kid back. Send them the following year. And so many parents, as I said, Raising Boys is the top-selling parenting book in the world so far this century. And it was massive, particularly in Europe and Asia. And so I met someone who was a Scottish education bureaucrat. He said, your book gave us so much trouble. He said, we had like 10,000 families held their kids back the year your book came out.
Wow.
We had empty classrooms. We had to build other classrooms in other places because this great wave came through the next year.
Yeah, the year that gets implemented, you don't have any boys in school.
No, that's right.
At the extreme,
but I get stopped by mums and dads, especially when I used to do my speaking tours, and they'd say, "We did that. We kept our son back, and he did great." He was a year more mature, he could hold his own, and I'd never met, out of thousands of people who told me that, I never met anyone who regretted doing that, because it paid off in high school as well. And does that make sense, Shaun, just as a dad to you?
So, what your description of that problem is, it's like you're telling my story of my childhood. I have this distinct memory when I was quite young, maybe kindergarten aged. And my parents brought me over to a friend's house, and they had a daughter my same age, and we were sitting down, and the parents were socializing, and me and the daughter were hanging out. And she had a bunch of coloring books, and I was coloring with her, and she colored beautifully. She outlined the area that she wanted to color in the color that she wanted to use, and then she was just filling it in, and her pictures were gorgeous. And I desperately wanted to be able to do that. And she was getting on me, like, why, stop coloring outside the lines, stop coloring outside the lines. And I couldn't physically do it. Yeah. I was so frustrated because I actually couldn't physically keep the crayon from going outside the lines. Yeah. And it ended up, I ended up in school. I have a September birthday, and in September, you can kind of fall on that edge where you can be in the earlier school year or in the later school year. And my parents put me in school early. And to make matters worse, I was big for my age, and I started skipping grades. And I prided myself on that. I was so smart that I'm skipping grades. But my emotional development and my intellectual development diverged. And frankly, the best thing that ever happened to me is after 8th grade, my parents decided to put me I was in a public school for 8th grade, and they decided to put me in a private school. And the private school said, we don't want him to go into 9th grade. We want him to repeat 8th grade.
Wow.
And that was actually a blow to me because it was such an area of pride that I'd skipped all these grades when I was younger and did all that stuff. And they said, listen, he's going to fit in better if he repeats 8th grade, and because he's not going to be the youngest kid in class anymore. And they could very well have cited your book. It would not have surprised me. And that's what they did. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow.
It just, I wasn't playing catch up anymore. And I felt so much, I didn't even understand how much anxiety and stress I had associated with this having to perform at this level that I just wasn't ready for. And it took that all off the table for me. And now I look at my son, who has my same makeup. He's only 6. Unfortunately, he's a January baby, so he's like fully smack dab in the middle of the school year. But he's very big. He's 6, but he looks like he's 9 or 10. And so people have expectations of him that he has maturity that he can't access. And I could see that same frustration in him. And it is, I'm just like, I really struggle with knowing what to do about that. And we've had conversations where I've sat him down and said, listen, this is what happened, and it can't happen that way. People, it's not fair, but people have expectations of you that are well beyond your age. And that's not fair. Sometimes life isn't fair. And this is one of those times we're going to have to figure out how to do the right thing here. And it's been a real tough thing for us.
And he's only 6 still. And so we need to do both. We got to, as an individual mum and dad, we have to do what we can to slow this down. And the school systems need to change. And give people an option. And in the school of the future, Shaun, the average boy will be a year older than the girl he sits beside.
Yeah.
And because for people listening, what happens is the way girls' bodies develop is they get their fine motor skills at about 4. They pick up those crayons and pencils you were talking about, and they're good at it straight away. Their fingers work properly. But boys develop, and so if you've got a daughter, anyone listening who's got a daughter, what you've got to do with girls is you have to build their core strength, so you get girls on trampolines, and throwing big netballs and basketballs to them, because girls need strength in the core. But boys develop core outwards, and so first of all they develop the trunk muscles, and then they develop their arms and legs, and also the nerves running to those, the nerves that control those arms and legs. And then when they've got that, finally it's the fingers that come last. And so what a boy's body tells him to do is move me. A little boy sitting in the classroom, and his body is saying, move me,
run around, make noise,
and he knows, a good kid is a still kid, in a elementary school classroom, you're supposed to be still, but his body's screaming, and guys that are listening to this, if you think back, you'll remember this feeling, sitting at a desk. It hurts. It actually physically hurts.
Like it was yesterday. I remember that feeling like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And so I work a lot with elementary school teachers, and I help them to realize, that little guy, get them moving, And so a lot of our schools now, they have exercise at the start of the day. They do a lot of moving around. That you can get up from your chair and stretch yourself and stand up, and you won't get sent to the principal. So you've got to find a boy-friendly school, and if teachers are attuned to this boy needs, then it's a whole lot better. But the main one, of course, was I think that probably changed your life, Shaun. Changed the trajectory of your life.
It really did.
Private school.
There's no question it changed the trajectory of my life. There's no question at all. And if it had happened earlier, it would have changed it even more, even better. I would have gotten involved in sports in a different way, or much earlier, which has been a wonderful part of my life. But it would have been. It really would have changed things for me. Now let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about, it's increasingly the case that households are becoming separate. Moms aren't living with dads as much. And there's a bunch of research that links the absence of a father in the home to higher risks of bad outcomes, delinquency, poor academic performance. And, at least here in the U.S., more than 1 in 4 children are living without a male in the home. And for a lot of parents, it's just simply, that's just the reality. Mom and dad don't live together. So what do you think we can do to mitigate the issues there? If you're staring down that reality, what do you do about it?
Okay, so again, this is huge, and it's Shaun. Luckily, this is not new. This has been the case for the whole 30 years that I've been writing about it. That a lot of kids are in single parent homes, and it's always really important to say to single moms that are listening to the podcast that women have raised boys on their own for thousands of years, and done just fine. Had them turn out really well, and it just means you got to understand the landscape, and because when I came back to live in the town I live in is called Launceston, and I came back here. After a 20-year absence. I lived in the UK and I lived up in the rainforests of New South Wales, but I came back to Launceston, and when I go to the supermarket, I'd sometimes bump into people who'd been clients of mine back in the 70s, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room. It's like I'd have to ask them. They say, "Oh, Steve, it's us. We saw you when we came with our little boy. And it was a single. And the elephant in the room was, well, was it any help? I was a young.
Yeah. How did it turn out?
Yeah, how'd it go? But more. And they'd say, well, yeah, look, it helped. And I'd say, well, what would you pass on to a young single mum today? As you've raised a son, I've met him, he's doing great. What would you pass on? And they'd say, it was always the same thing, Shaun. They'd say, I made sure he knew what a good man looked like. Because you can't turn into one if you've never seen one. Yeah. And so those mums, they recognize, okay, I can get him 90% there. If I'm loving and if I'm understanding of his boy energies and I don't get into negative, put downs and fights with him, then I can get 90% there. But he's got to see some good men, and so that's right. So we say don't send him to Kev's College of Karate. Unless you like the look of Kev.
There you go. Yeah.
Whether it's a sport or a musical instrument or whatever it is, role models are the real thing. And in a second, we can talk a bit about that if you've got time, Shaun, because it's a big theme of mine. But those mums, they kind of recruited. They said, okay, he hasn't got a dad. But he's got an uncle, who's a really nice guy. So, uncle, can you take him fishing? couple of times a month. And Grandpa, can you take an interest? He's having a bit of a struggle. Can you take a bit of an interest in him? It doesn't matter who. It's, the guys, the two guys who live next door. If he gets this kind of palette of a lot of different styles of masculinity, then he can begin to have a bit of that and a bit of this, and learn what kindness looks like in a male, and that it's a combination of kind of taking in the way of being male, but it's also feeling validated as a male. Grandpa and I hang out. Grandpa thinks I'm all right, even though I'm struggling at school. Grandpa says I'm a great kid and I'm good company and I'm good with a fishing line. And so that's what those mums did. They made sure that the boy didn't grow up in a kind of hostile, a world hostile to males. Does that make sense, Shaun?
It does. Well, and I think that there's, the thing that we talked about in the very beginning, where men aren't supportive of each other in the way that women are, right? My wife has 8 friends that she tells every detail of her life to, and I really struggle to open up to even my closest friends. And in that same way, we don't seek out, young men to mentor necessarily, or we're not necessarily going to seek out mentors if we're a high school age boy or something like that. And it's so critical. And the cultural institutions that used to exist to make that happen, your church or local programs and those sorts of things, those are all gone now. And so it's not going to happen by default. And that means you have to take responsibility of it. You have to design it yourself. You have to be intentional about it. Now, that also means that you can customize it. You don't just have to go to the Catholic Church on the corner where there might be some problems. You can customize it for your own needs, but you have to do it.
Yeah. And knowing that, I think people can get very intentional about it, and it's not rocket science. It's not that hard. The guys that are in the terrific thing about the psychology of us men is, if someone points us to a job, we'll do it. And we have a really great quality, which is we like to do heroic things. And if someone says my kid's in trouble, I think it's going to be a year or two where he needs just someone that's a bit involved in his life. So we think, okay, well, if that's what you like, I'll give it a go. But we would have been.
There is a man on the planet. I don't think that there is a man on the planet, a decent man on the planet, that being asked that question wouldn't love the opportunity to do that for somebody. I think I just can't imagine anybody I know, any decent man I know, when having that question posed to them, every single one of them would jump at the opportunity to do that.
It's a hopeful message. And Shaun, can I talk about a little part of this that will make sense to people more? And because it's to do with there are qualities that you would want to have. When we talk about a good man or a life-affirming masculinity, that it opens up into some things, and for instance, you would being patient. He's always going to grow up. He's probably going to be a dad and be a husband or a partner. So you want him to be patient. You want him to be kind. You want him to have stickability and endurance, and you want him to be a man of his word, and those kinds of a whole bunch of things. Now, if we take patience for example, it's actually quite a complicated thing to be patient. It's not. You can't sort of say to a kid, "Be patient," and or have it in a PowerPoint presentation, and because what it is, it's a way of breathing. When you're patient, you kind of change how you breathe and you change how you stand, and
Yeah,
you
there's a
um,
physiological component to patience, isn't there?
yeah, yeah. There's a whole you drop your agenda that and you say, okay, this is going to take a bit. I'm going to listen to this kid while he pours something out, or I have to wait because he's really slow with this. And so
Right.
patience is a very complex, nonverbal, multifaceted skill. Now, the only way to learn that is it's a right brain thing. You have to see it going on. And and human beings, it's called mirror learning. And our nervous system, I watch you, and I take in your movements and your breathing rhythms and the way that your face moves and your eyes move. And I've got a kind of a Shaun sense that I can take on board. If I spent a couple of days with you, I could do Shaun, and
Sure.
qualities that
Yeah.
you have that I don't have, and I can put those into my masculinity for future, use. And the role modeling is made up of, you know, a boy. We drink in what we are is we're a bundle of all the good people we've ever met, male or female. And so if your son has seen patience, and he's seen forbearance, and he's seen stickability and vulnerability and all those qualities, then it's programmed into him, and he can do it. So they need thousands of hours of male company, school teachers and coaches and guys on TV and in the old days that was there. You would,
Yeah. It
you know,
happened by default.
yeah, yeah.
I want to touch
That's the end
on
of it.
one more really, really big subject, and I know this is something we could probably go hours on, but I really want to get your opinion about it, and that is navigating the digital Wild West. I'm talking about like stuff like screen time and pornography and gaming and gambling in our pocket and all of those things. I'm terrified about these things. This is, in fact, one of the reasons that I started this whole project, is because I've realized that the world that my boy is going to graduate into is so completely, it's a foreign territory for me. It might as well be a different planet from the one that I grew up in. And because of these things, what is your advice to parents to navigate these boundaryless digital realities? Rather, I mean, I think a lot of us just stick our head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist, or pretend it's, a matter of force of will or something like that. But they rewire your brain. What do we do? What is your advice about that?
Very important question, Sean, and it's a combination of two things. One is just restricting the whole phenomenon, putting the brakes on, and the other is
Yeah.
giving them some guidance and tools to use when they do encounter it. And I can spell those out a tiny bit now. In my country, Australia, I don't know if you know this, but about
I do. I
four
love
weeks,
it. Go ahead and tell
but yeah,
everybody.
4 weeks ago, the government passed legislation that social media companies are not allowed to subscribe under 16s. And so under 16s are not able to go on, not able to have a Facebook account, an Instagram account, a whole bunch of TikTok, all of
Yeah.
those. They can still do YouTubes, but they can't have an account, so that they can't be
Interesting. Okay.
algorithmed. And because it's when you have an account, the algorithm steers you into the
Yeah.
manosphere and the toxic stuff. And so already parents are incredibly relieved, and it meant that if you had a involved mum or dad, they were already putting those brakes on. But if you had a kind of deadbeat parent who just was too exhausted or didn't care or whatever, it meant you didn't have a horrible childhood, because the government had solved that problem for you.
Yeah.
And this is sweeping the world now. There are countries in Europe who are just following quickly. They're watching the experiment here, and they're pretty much bringing it on board. But
I bet.
meantime,
Yeah. I mean, and
um,
it's just, it's the kind of thing the government has to step in and do because,
yeah,
I mean, you could say, oh, well, just don't let your kid use social media until they're 16. All right, good luck. That's somebody who doesn't have kids. That's somebody who isn't getting pestered day by when can I get a smartphone? My kid, my 6-year-old boy is asking me when he can have an iPhone already. He's already
yeah,
pushing me on it. And
yeah.
I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's like we're a herd animal, and it's very hard to stand against the herd, and
Yeah.
so it helps. In Australia, there's a thing called the Heads Up Alliance, and it's kind of heads up from your phone, from your device,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
a school communities. It tends to happen school by school. That the school will say, look, let's all get on board. Let's none of us give kids smartphones till they're 14. And our let's all do this so it makes it easier on the individual. And I know we're running out of time, Shaun, and so I'll come around to the other part really quickly for you.
Yeah.
That the other part is that, particularly with pornography, kids, they will see it, and there'll be some kid usually by the age of 10, some kid in the school will have shown them some horrible thing on their phone or
Yeah. Right.
photograph. And so we have to let them know, say, look, there's this thing around, it's called pornography, and it's people doing things with each other's bodies. And if you see it, you'll be kind of, like, wow, what's that? You want to have a look because you're curious, and that's all right. And if it's a picture of a girl with no clothes on, of course we're attracted to girls, and they're beautiful, and but there's some problems with this stuff, and it's in particular what happens in pornography is different to real life, and in our books we list the differences that you can teach your kids. For instance, people are not up for sex the minute they first meet each other, and that. The most specific one is that real girls don't like being strangled, they don't like being slapped, and they don't like being put down, with put downs and verbal abuse, because I think it's 70% of pornography depicts those things,
Wow.
and the actresses are paid. And you explain to your kids the actresses are often really poor, and they have a lot of trouble, paying for their food and their kids and their apartment, and so sometimes they make these movies to make some money, and it's really sad that they have to do that, and they have to pretend to like it, and so trust me, girls don't like that stuff, and if you do that stuff to girls, they won't like you, and so. So pornography miseducates you, and so this is the sort of thing you talk to kids about when they're about 12, Shaun. When
That
they're
is
8, you
such
just say, look,
what a powerful way
yeah,
to communicate that. And I love that trigger of when they see it, they're going to come to you. I mean, you've got to have that kind of relationship too. And then you get prepared for that conversation. I
yeah,
love that.
and because the effects of all of these things are to do with exposure, it's a dose related thing. The more you see, the worse you're off. Is you don't have devices in bedrooms, and and only in the public parts of your house, that where everyone sees what each other's doing. Yeah, and very very important, because the kids get so messed up with this, and there's huge companies making a lot of money from messing your kids up, and so you have to fight
Yeah.
back.
Wow. That is tremendous advice. I appreciate it. Now, I like to finish off every single one of these discussions by asking the same question of everybody. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. Feel free to take as much time as you want to think about it. But give me one principle that you think is important for raising strong, powerful, excellent men.
Okay, look, I think it's a paradoxical thing, Shaun, that tenderness is the secret of strength, and that what happens if we're tender and gentle with our little guys, including when we wrestling with them and fighting with them and things like that, where we never ever hurt them, and they know that they can that they're deeply loved, then their natural empathy will stay, and so when they see someone hurting, they'll want to help them, and they'll never be the cause of hurt to somebody else. And so it's the stuff you do in the first 2 years, where you're gentle with them and patient and even when they're just impossible, and you've got to kind of,
Respond
hold
with
them,
tenderness, yeah.
carry them back to the car in a screaming heap. Don't get angry, don't hurt them, because when you put hurt into a kid, the hurt will come out on someone else down the track. Kids who are hit will hit when they grow up. Kids who see their dad hit their mom will hit their wife as well. And if you hit your kid and you hit your wife, it's almost a guarantee your son will end up in jail. A guarantee. And wow. So those are things. If you're a dad, and this is not just a minority, it's all of us dads, me too. We had to learn how to be safe and how to manage our strong feelings, walk away when we just don't know what we're going to do. And so that a kid can say, I always feel safe with my dad. He's my safety go-to guy. That's the foundation of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Half of masculinity is being a protector, right? You're a protector and you're a provider. Yeah. And you're not a protector if your kid can't say that about you, right?
He's protection from you. That's right. Yeah.
I love that. That is a fantastic principle. Thank you for adding that to my list. That is tremendous. The books are Raising Boys and The New Manhood. Check them out. You can learn more about Steve's work at stevebiddulph.com. The link is in the show notes. If this episode moved you, please share it with another dad or a mentor or a teacher or another parent who's in the fight for the soul of our boys. Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great interview, Shaun. Thanks very much, and love to everyone who is watching or listening. See you later. Bye-bye.
Raising Men is produced by Fiel Hernandez. This episode was edited by Ralph Tolentino.